with that information. But the person that they think that she saw was a man named Crosby. Now, Crosby worked at the location Mark Stebbins had been. What was it? The Legion Hall, I think. Stebbins' mother apparently was working there, is what I'm understanding, and his brother was there at the time as well. Mark Stebbins decided to leave on his own because there was a movie he wanted to see. So apparently this Crosby also worked there, and he claims that he offered Mark Stebbins a ride home. Now, I don't know if he accepted or not, but he would have been the last person to see Mark alive, apparently. And then at some point, a tip was made about him. I'm thinking it's by someone other than Polly. But an officer did go to his house, and Mr. Crosby was in the driveway cleaning out his car and had taken out a cooler. The officer noticed that there was hair caught in the hinge of the cooler that looked similar to Mark Stebbins' hair, but then it doesn't look like anything was ever done with that. Now, they said that Crosby was a known pedophile, but had preference for female children as opposed to, males like most of the other individuals in this case. But he was friends with this Arch Sloan person who, had a penchant for boys. Sicko. Now, for the connection with this Arch Sloan, his name came up on the radar several times, and it doesn't look like, it was ever taken seriously. They found some hair in Sloan's car that matched with some hair that was found on Timothy King and Mark Stebbins. It shouldn't have been. And it looks like they collected this evidence from Sloan's car way early on and then never did anything with it. I guess Sloan had a parole officer or probation officer who told the police that they should really check into this guy. He was a convicted pedophile. He also had a camper truck where he was known to, keep the kids captive. And there was some indication that that truck had been seen near the sites where Christine was taken and left. And the detective, Corey Williams, he suggested that perhaps that same camper had been used. Mark Stebbins was dumped. Sorry, I don't like that word. But then there was other indication of other vehicles at the time, and there were also other vehicles where hairs were found. One of those was Christopher Bush's car. And a hair that was found there matched a hair that was also found on Jill. The hair was ultimately traced to one of Christopher Bush's victims. Now, this was that James Vincent Gunnels, who was actually 14 at the time, and he, was attacked by Bush twice and did go to the police, and warrants were issued. And Chris Bush was arrested. But they were trying to say that Gunnels, was a participant. And he was just a skinny kid, not very old, victimized by these guys twice. And he was so fearful that he actually purposely failed a polygraph that could have gotten him released on parole. And it looks like he did this twice. Now, there was also another victim of Bush and Green, and his name was Bowman. Okay, it was Kenny Bowman. Kenneth, I guess. So this Kenny, he says that Green told him Bush had previously murdered a child, and then Green also tried to strangle him and then asked him to help lure other children. And it seems like maybe at some point he did do that. But again, he was just a kid and fearful. So, we can't forget that he was a victim, and who knows what kind of, threats they made towards this child and why they're trying to push this off on these children when you have all these adults involved is just beyond me. But there definitely did seem to be signs of a cover-up. Now, at some point, I think it was the FBI was asking this Jessica, the prosecutor, hold on, let me find her name. Oh, I don't see it. I think it was Miller. But they were requesting that all the files be transferred to, I think it was the FBI, and she just flat out refused to give the files up. Now, in the course of the investigation, they were trying to get Arch Sloan to name off people that the car may, or the hair in the car may have belonged to. And they didn't tell him, straight out that it was not his. They were using that as kind of a tool to get him to cooperate. And so she was up for re-election and immediately went on national television, did this huge press conference. Oh, it's Jessica Cooper. And said that, the hair's not his, but we need your help in figuring out whose hair it is. Like, the public is going to have access to this information. I mean, it's just insane. But in doing this, what she did was, shut him down. Now he knows it's not his hair. He doesn't have to cooperate. And so that was just really, I don't know, underhanded. And so I guess it wasn't the FBI, it was the Department of Justice who wanted not only the Oakland County child killer case, but there were 11 other cases that they requested, and she impeded that as well. So you have multiple cases going on, and it's all kind of the same major players. Apparently there was a case involving a little girl that was connected to, they thought, Christopher Bush. And so he was brought in for a polygraph on that. And he got stuck on the question of, I don't know if it was a murder or molestation, as to whether or not he had harmed this girl. And he wouldn't answer the question. And this didn't come out until much later. But the polygrapher asked him, why can't you answer this? And he said, well, because I'm upset, whatever, because I didn't harm this girl, but I did, quote, do the Timothy King things, saying he murdered Timothy King. But since it was on a different case, and there were, confidentiality issues or whatever, that information was not released until much later, when another gentleman who actually was a friend of Timothy King and ultimately became a polygrapher, but wasn't working on that case, went to a national conference for polygraphers and met the guy who got that confession during that other polygraph. And so he couldn't tell this other polygrapher what the man's name was, so he just gave him the clue that the person was dead and their attorney was dead. And so this would have been after Bush's suicide, and incidentally, Bush's second lawyer had passed away in 2017. Her name was Jane Burgess, I think. And it looks like she died of natural causes. There's some indication that perhaps she was diabetic. But his was definitely a strange death. They ruled it a suicide, but it really seemed impossible that could have been a suicide. Apparently his blood alcohol level was like 4 times the legal limit. He was under the blankets. There was no gunshot residue on his hands. There was no contact wound with the gun. The shell casings, there were 4, but he was only shot. And I think there was 1 bullet in the wall. There was no blood anywhere. And they found 4 shell casings, so there were only 2 shots fired. And they were in weird places, like propped up on lighters and different things. And they wrapped it up very quickly and immediately notified the media, because the media can't report on suicides, apparently, or they don't, at least back in those days. And so they wanted to be real quick to get it out there that it wasn't a murder, so there wouldn't be any media coverage. Now, oddly, the first officer on the scene was later convicted in, I don't know how many. He was there by himself for a good half hour before anyone else showed up. So, I mean, who knows? Now, oddly, there was another police officer who they say committed suicide